Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a game week edition of the Lasching Out Podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. I'm Jarrod Prugar alongside my good friend Kevin Quigley, and we have a special guest from West Virginia Sports Now, Mike Asti. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Mike.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on. It's nice when the Sports Now family gets together for a big game. It's happened a lot in recent years, but yeah, I'm running WV Sports Now. Also, I am a part of Yard Barker, so a featured writer over there. I do host the Mountaineer Report now with Ethan Bach here as part of WVSN, and then have my own podcast, Mic Drop, which is available everywhere you get your podcast. Kind of focuses on the Pittsburgh overall region and then a little bit of the Mountaineers as well. I'm kind of all over the place. I'm also involved with Sirius XM and their Big 12 channel and several different projects. I've been, for anyone who isn't aware of me, prior to any of that, I've been throughout the Pittsburgh market at the Tribune Review, used to run what was Trib Live Radio, PXI, WPXI, called a lot of games, whether it be high school, college, etc. Worked at Robert Morris, if that's a college that rings a bell for anybody else.
That's the good stuff, man.
Yeah,
I'm so glad you talked to Robert Morris. We can talk about that all day, every day.
Yeah, so I called their women's basketball games during an NCAA tournament run, was a multimedia journalist for them. This is years and years ago, kind of the early days of my career after graduating. I am, full disclosure, a WVU alum as well, kind of started doing college radio and within student media and the main college newspaper there, and then kind of propelled my career from then on. But as you see there, Mike, ASTI11 is me on social, so you can find all of that and so much more just by going there.
That's right. We are so glad you're joining us. Of course, it's West Virginia week. Kevin and I talked briefly about it on Sunday when we recorded our last podcast. But this is a big game, not just for Penn State. It's probably even bigger for West Virginia. They've shut down schools on Friday, right, which is wild. You know, schools around our area here in central Pennsylvania, in Pittsburgh even, are getting shut down because of the heat. But this isn't because of the heat. This is because Morgantown, West Virginia is going to be the place to be in the college football world Saturday afternoon for Big Noon, which means the game's going to take about 6.5 hours. But Mike, can you just speak to the atmosphere and what to expect for those maybe going to Morgantown and even those that might be watching from home?
Yeah, and this is going to be unique because the atmosphere leading up to this game is not going to just start Saturday morning with this Big Noon kickoff. It's really arguably going on now, but will really hit steam on Friday when you could argue he's probably the most prominent alum of any school, certainly a part of national media now, and Pat McAfee. He's going to be hosting his show live in Morgantown at noon on Friday afternoon. And where he's hosting it, guys, it's not in front of the stadium. He's on campus. I'm not sure how they're going to have class at WVU during that thing, because I can't imagine trying to drive or get to your class or anything else besides experiencing the Pat McAfee show where he's having that. And it ironically is also where Old Mountaineer Field used to be located, downtown Morgantown on the WVU campus. So from Friday on, it's going to be pageantry. It's going to be all about this game and Mountaineer football more than really any other season of week one has been for a long time. Certainly from when I was a student to now, there's been a lot of big games, obviously, even going back to the rebirth of the Brawl a couple of years ago. They opened a season in a neutral site location against Alabama one year. They've had big games, but the program is promoting that this is the biggest season opener at home since Ohio State, another Big Ten school, came to Morgantown in 1998 as the top-ranked Buckeyes. And that was a season that West Virginia kind of unraveled and didn't have that great of a year, even though there were expectations entering that season. So the biggest game of the century, arguably, in terms of a season opener at home. And then what makes WVU unique, it's pretty obvious, but you got to speak to it. Obviously, there's no major MLB, NFL, NBA, NHL team in state college, but there are plenty in Pennsylvania. You can certainly drive and get to, there's Flyers fans, there's Penguin fans. There's a lot going on in the state. In the state of West Virginia, it's just the Mountaineers. There's the Black Bears, but in terms of major sports, they are the pro team. And everyone knows a lot of West Virginia people are Steelers fans. Some in the southern part are Bengals fans or whatever. A lot of people are fans of teams all over the country. And Pittsburgh's only an hour away. Full disclosure, I do live in a suburb of Pittsburgh and travel down there to cover the Mountaineers. It's not far. A lot of people there go to Steeler games. you can arguably get to Pittsburgh. Not arguably, you can get to Pittsburgh quicker than a lot of parts of the state. But with all of that said, that's still a team that represents Pittsburgh. It's still the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're not the West Virginia Steelers. They're not the regional Steelers. They're still the Pittsburgh Steelers. It does bother people. So to have a team with West Virginia on the jersey, West Virginia in front of the name, that's it. It's just the Mountaineers at a major level. So it makes it to another level for the fans. And also, guys, you're not getting early days Neo Brown. Admittedly, if you look at pictures I was covering, if you go to those games, the rowdiness, what James Franklin's talked about of the Hornets' Nest that was there under Rich Rod, was even there under Dana, was certainly there under Don Nalen, that was gone for a while. The fans were getting so mad at dark days for the program that hadn't been seen since the 70s. They were either not going, they were leaving games in the middle of those games. They were sending a message they didn't like what was happening. But now, after a 9-win season, that energy's back. That energy came back last year. It's back now. So Penn State's not getting the atmosphere of 2021. They're getting the 2024 atmosphere, which is going to be like I would imagine it was. And guys, I'll even paint this picture for you. It's going to be so rowdy. The coaches literally, during their weekly press conference, both Jordan Leslie, the DC, Neil Brown, head coach, some of the players too, literally said to the fans, we want you to be as loud as possible. You can impact the game. But be loud when we're on defense. Don't be that loud when we're on offense. We need to be able to hear the plays. They're legit concerned that it's going to be so insane. Grant Green will have trouble hearing plays. So that's kind of painting the picture of what it should be like. And anything shy of that, I think, will be a disappointment. And I think Pat McAfee will make sure the energy's there, no matter what the fans want to bring to the table, because it is noon and it's an early wake up.
I mean, do you think he gets as trashed as he did in Ireland?
He said he's not going to. Maybe he did get some flack. It's going to be hard to avoid that. I mean, in Morgantown, he's obviously been back. He was even back for the spring game. He coached the spring game with Pat White, and I know he was definitely smashed at some bars there, even though not on national TV. It's going to be hard to believe it's not going to happen. But he said he was going to, reel it in. Maybe the level of he was drunk in Ireland is a level that you can't get to again, because that was really peak McAfee drunk. But I don't even think I've seen him that drunk in a long time. But it's going to be wild. People have joked, and who knows? I mean, he's obviously on game day. He has those kicking contests with fans. I think he should race a fan up the Life Science Building steps, which is basically a gauntlet. That's one hell of a workout. See if he can put that together and who wins, and if he gives some money for that. But in all seriousness, this is gonna be peak McAfee. A lot of alums are gonna be there. A lot of recruits are gonna be there. It's going to be wild because, as you guys also know, there's a lot of Penn State fans that are even living in Pittsburgh. There's obviously a lot of West Virginia fans in the state of West Virginia and around that region, but there's a lot of WVU fans all over the country that are coming in for this game. I know a lot of people flying in for this that would not be flying in for week one if Albany was week one and this was week two. And you're even going to have road fans that are close enough to come to this. It's not that far to go from State College to this. So this is purely sold out on both sides and should be insane. And I'm wondering how the press box can hold all of us, because it's smaller than what goes on in State College. That's the one thing I know they're in the works of trying to build a new one and get to the level they should be in that regard. So this is pure college football press box for anyone who's not been in there, who's going to be. I mean, we're going to be packed to the gills in that thing.
Kevin, sorry for cutting you off there. Go ahead.
No, you're right. I've already forgotten what I was going to say.
Very good.
I will say Patrick has a long day on Saturday, so
yeah,
he's got to go to College Station. So he's probably getting rowdy tonight. If you're in Morgantown, so
yeah,
and
that's
I think
true.
This is such a great opportunity for college football. Like, you have two what could be and very well should be perennial powers in the Northeast. That there's nothing other than essentially an MLB draft league team anywhere near them, right? So, like, obviously,
right.
The West Virginia Black Bears, RIP New York Penn League, but and then State College Spikes. But for both of these schools, football is life, and
100%.
It's one of those situations now where they get to showcase this in Morgantown. Obviously, last year was at Beaver Stadium, and Mike, you were there. Great atmosphere for that. For week one, it was a stripe out,
100%.
Or the helmet stripe, I guess I should say. But it's a great opportunity for college football to be showcased on its on a town that probably doesn't get a lot of hype. And Morgantown is a great place. I was able to go there a couple times when we played West Virginia in baseball in college, but it's a really good time, and it's really good for college football. Bringing Big Noon there, it's not nearly as big as ESPN and Game Day, but it's just as good, and it's still an opportunity to showcase Milan-Pusker Stadium in both programs, because this is a game that has some potential playoff implications in week one.
It does, and the benefit of McAfee, guys, too. I know Neil Brown was annoyed by him because he called him the most disappointing program in the country a couple years ago. When they've been bad, McAfee is not going to lie. He'll criticize, and then, as you can see, and it's semi-annoying for me covering, I mean, McAfee's talking about West Virginia seemingly 3 times a day. Like, it's almost too much from the West Virginia perspective. He is really churning content in favor of the Mountaineers, especially now, but he even is in the offseason. He's giving me a WU segment in the middle of a national show in February when there's no football going on, because that is his bread and butter. So that can be annoying for some, but the benefit of the program now, especially with them being good, Kevin, you mentioned, it's Fox, it's Big Noon kickoff, it's not Game Day. The fans haven't had Game Days in 2012, LSU. They do want Game Day again. Maybe that'll happen. And they wanted a night game. Big Noon kickoff's a day game, but for it to be Fox's top billing, it had to be their equivalent to the prime time is Big Noon kickoff, so they are giving them that love. But they're almost getting the best of both worlds. I mean, you don't get McAfee on Saturday, but you get McAfee on Friday, and that show's on ESPN. It's going to be packed. You're going to get images of the campus and the fans there, and then you flip to Big Noon kickoff at the stadium on Saturday. So you're getting national exposure twice. I mean, there's no other program getting that this coming weekend on your campus, and arguably more because of how much McAfee's talking about this. In terms of overall words on social media and what has been said on ESPN because of McAfee, I'd have to imagine West Virginia's right up there with any other college program, if not ahead, this week. So that's and I do think obviously Penn State's a favorite. They're still 7.5-point favorite. They have been more successful recently, and it makes sense they're the favorite. They won last year. But it's also good that West Virginia is getting this exposure off of a good year with a lot of the team coming back. This is a good team. This is a more formidable foe for Penn State. I mean, I'll let the cat out of the bag here. I already put it out. I do think Penn State's going to win this. The talent will take over. But this should not be a 30-point blowout. They cannot sleep through this game. I do know Penn State has started slow on some early kickoff games on the road. They do that, they could be down 2 touchdowns. It would not be out of this world shocking. So it's the best situation West Virginia could be in under Brown to have this showcase right now.
Yeah, and you said it's national media coverage for West Virginia. They haven't had that since everyone was like, why the hell is West Virginia going to the Big 12? Like, that's the last time like West Virginia's been in that national news cycle. Yeah. So the fact that they're on the mothership for
at least in a good way. I mean,
right. Not for Dana Holgerson being a train wreck or tire
right.
fire.
I mean, you're right. Even in his other 10-win season, 2016, I mean, people forget about it. It got no attention. He won 10 games, and literally there's people acting like he never won games after 2011. That's just not true. But it wasn't it wasn't to this level. It wasn't covered to this level. And I mean, this is also the first time that the fans really believe they can legit win the Big 12. And as you know, this is the best opportunity because now you win a conference, you're in the playoff. That's the path. This is cool to have this regional game, this regional historic rivalry game, this out-of-conference game. They have the Brawl 2 again, but it's all about conference play. So you could lose to Penn State by 20, and if you win the Big 12, you're in the playoff. Penn State could even end up not in the playoffs, and West Virginia could get in the playoff if they win the Big 12, and Penn State wins the head-to-head. So we could have that debate, and that could happen. So this is the opportunity for West Virginia to take advantage of the situation and the fact that the conference is wide open now. And historically, as we stand, they are the all-time winningest current Big 12 program. I don't know how many people would have thought that would have been the case when everything was shaking out. I mean, they're arguably the blue blood of the Big 12 with Utah and Oklahoma State.
That is one hell of a statistic.
Yeah, it's wild. You can look it up. It's out there. And that's however when you slice it, because people sometimes don't count certain wins from 1800s, etc. I mean, no matter what you do, that's the case.
Well, Pitt counts all those national championships.
Don't get me started. They do count a lot of fake national titles that anyone watching, look up 1934. That's the one that's the most ridiculous. Yeah, they kind of a lot of fake things. But regardless of what you want to claim and what's fake or real, in terms of just overall wins, the WVU is 15th and the most in the Big 12. So, and this is even good for Penn State in a way, because figuring they do win this, West Virginia did not get preseason ranked, but Penn State fans are going to need to be big West Virginia fans after this game, because they want to be able to say this is a quality out-of-conference victory. You want to say this is a ranked team that you beat. James Franklin, I actually was on somebody's show earlier today, and he said that last year, middle of the season, Franklin was talking about Garrett Green, and they were like, this is awkwardly weird. Like, we're done with it. And it's to pump up the team you beat. Like, that's what he's going to want to do again.
That's Franklin in a nutshell. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he does that every year.
Yeah. So I would expect that even more so, especially if you get a West Virginia team that wins the Big 12. He will probably have his closing season presser before the playoff, no matter what they do in the Big 10, being like, yep, you see them. We beat them by 10. They won the Big 12. Look at how great they are. Chalk it up for a win for us.
Like, why we lost to Ohio State at home for the 17th year in a row.
Right. That'll happen. Yeah.
So,
but yeah,
no,
I mean,
you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and there's also more pressure on Penn State in this game. Yeah, it's at home. You have McAfee. There is pressure because West Virginia's been talking some smack entering the week. It's almost a little bit too much probably. But West Virginia loses this, especially if they keep it close. I don't think anyone's going to sit there and say their season's ruined or it's a major disappointment or, it's going to be, okay, this is a top 10 team. You're not ranked yet. Long as you still win the brawl and then win enough games in the Big 12. Honestly, they wouldn't even be out of question for an at-large bid. They probably wouldn't get it, but they're playing 3 ranked teams beyond Penn State based on preseason ranks. So their season's not over. Whereas if Penn State loses, mathematically, they wouldn't be out of it. You could win the Big 10. You could beat Ohio State for the first time in forever, as Jarrod's saying that they probably
almost 10 years.
Yeah,
which is wild to say.
But you lose to West Virginia if you're Penn State, you're almost in a must-win then against Penn State.
You have to win
Ohio
out,
State. You almost need to have it because you need a quality win, and if it's not the Mountaineers, it got to come. You don't play Michigan. You're looking at that Ohio State game or maybe one of the former Pac-12 teams, but you don't play them all, obviously.
And it's Saturday's Super Bowl-esque.
Yeah.
Because the conversation started last week. There was no football last week, except for Georgia Tech, Florida State, a couple other games. But Pat McAfee put West Virginia in the college football playoff on game day.
Over Penn State being a first team out.
Yeah. So the Super Bowl talk of there not being a lot of football, you get that extra week of coverage. And because it's week one, there's not any NFL to compete against. You're just competing against the other college games, and you're on Fox Big Noon. So you're on actual antenna bunny ear cable television. You don't have to pay to watch this one.
Yeah, this isn't streaming needed. Pac-12. This isn't Amazon. This is legit. Yeah.
And the best thing for us, for Mike, myself, and Joe Smeltzer with NSN, we're all going to be there. So we're going to have you covered for quite some time before, leading up to, during the game, and then after the game, just like we did last year when we were all together in the spacious Beaver Stadium press box. Well, we're gonna get into the X's and O's and the coaches when we come back here for the second segment of the Lashing Out Podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. Welcome back to the second segment of the Lashing Out Podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. I'm joined with my buddy Mike from West Virginia Sports Now and my buddy Kevin as well. We're gonna talk a little bit of X's and O's. We're gonna talk a little bit about the coaches here because there are various degrees of pressure on Neil Brown versus James Franklin, and
polarizing guys, to say the least.
They both have great goatees right now.
They do.
I'm not sure if they planned that, but how they got here is very, very different. James Franklin is a 9, 10, 11 win a year guy, but that 1 or 2 losses is always to Ohio State and Michigan. Neil Brown started slow. He didn't take over the greatest of situations in West Virginia, coming from Tulane, but
Troy.
You can tell that he was building it. Oh, Troy. That's sorry. But it's just one of those situations where now it takes time. And this is such an overused phrase, but it's accurate. Trust the process. And now it's starting to pay off, for West Virginia. They have a 9-win season in the Big 12. A couple of the big dogs in the Big 12 are now in the SEC.
Yeah.
But now, on the flip side, now you got some pretty big dogs in the Big 10. Not only do you have Michigan and Ohio State, but you have Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA, to name the Pac-12 teams now. So the two coaches are very, very polarizing, and it's very interesting to see how they both got to where they're at in Morgantown on Saturday.
Yeah, and entering the game last year, James Franklin had the pressure of it got to be at least a 10-win season at minimum. That's kind of where he is now. Obviously, that's perpetually the situation for Penn State. But Neil Brown, on the flip side, entered the game not sure he would last the year as the head coach. He was on the hot seat going into the game. Everyone's sports book had him as the first coach to be fired. And he ended up not only not getting fired, but having by far the best season he's had at West Virginia, the best season for that program in a while since the tail end of Dana, really that 2016 year, because the last couple of years weren't as great as you mentioned. He didn't take over the best situation. And the vibes now are the fans defending him, getting excited, talking about Big 12 championships, college football playoff. If this was 365 days ago, nobody would have been saying any of that. Nobody was saying any of that. For anyone, who's under a rock and wants to know about what it was like a year ago and you weren't living through it. It was the exact opposite of funeral atmosphere around campus, around the facility. Wasn't fun. And even now covering, you're at practice, Neil Brown will ask you how your family's doing. He'll be very jovial. If you saw the other day, he's dropping sarcastic comments. He called Ohio State a good little sporty team. Like he's getting into his personality and feeling comfortable now. Whereas a year ago, if you even looked at him the wrong way and you weren't a player, he was done. Like he was feeling the pressure. He didn't want to admit it, but he wasn't having fun there. His family wasn't having fun there. And as you guys could imagine, it got to an unreasonable level. I mean, his family was dealing with a lot. They couldn't even go to the movie without getting yelled at by fans. He literally had the first 0-2 start for a West Virginia team since the 70s when they started 0-2 in the 5-7 season. They had not been 0-2 in any year since the end of the 70s. That's how long it had been. So Mountaineer fans kind of got spoiled in a way. And as you mentioned, he took over a rough situation. Pretty much everybody that won with Dana was either gone or the carryovers, as Brown's even admitted, he admitted to me personally, were, I don't know what else to call them other than locker room cancers. I mean, players have now come out and said that they were the energy vampires that had to be sucked out of the program. And Brown has admitted that if you had the rules of today, he would have said, we can win, we can lose with you or lose without you. And he would have just got rid of pretty much all of them and said, go into the portal. I want you gone. This isn't a good vibe here. In 2019, he couldn't do that. He came over right before NIL became a thing, right before the portal got to be what it is now. And then right as those vibes are so bad and he took over a rough situation, then you have COVID coming in. So no excuses for him. You can't, win a few games a year at West Virginia. The expectations should be higher than barely crawling in bowl games and going 5-7 and having a losing season for sure. But it was just a perfect storm of all the crap to make it so rough. And he's going into year 6, so you got to have it fixed now. But now the Mountaineer program feels like it's riding high, but also you have expectations now. If they go into this year and all of a sudden turn around a 6-6 year and barely get into a bowl game again, or somehow worse and have a losing season, then he could be fired. The vibes would be gone. Everything that you have now, the good nature of the situation now, would be gone. And even though he signed an extension for 4 more years, he took less in his buyout, took less annually, and of course to send some money to assistant coaches. But part of why he wasn't fired after the 5-7 year when everybody nationally said he had to be gone is because that buyout was so insane at that point. He had a really solid contract situation. It would be easier to let him go now. So if they would somehow lose to Penn State, lose to Pitt, lose to Kansas, they're 1-3. They got the FCS win as the only win. It's not like he's just safe and everything is comfortable. So he's still feeling pressure. But it's a different kind of pressure than James Franklin, for sure, who Penn State fans feel like it's playoff or bust, I would imagine. Since you've been, top 12, you would have been in 6 times the last 10 years and all of that. But some of that's starting to erupt. It's coming now. I mean, this year, if they win 8 or 9, he'll stabilize. But it's coming to that pressure, and this is the team that's coming back that has Green, that has most of the roster from last year, that has major conference transfers. There is an expectation now, whereas going into last year, you're supposed to win 4 games, you win 6 or 7. Everybody thinks you're great. This year, you win 7, That's not any. No one's going to be lifting him on their shoulders in a minor bowl game if he wins 7 this year. It will not be like it was last year when that gave him 9 wins and it was well ahead of expectations at that point.
I'll say the coaching situation last year has been flipped to this year because Neil Brown has the momentum. It feels like the tide's moving in his direction. Whereas James Franklin, it is playoff or bust. If they don't make the playoff this year, what Neil Brown was experiencing week 1 last year of you better win or you're gone, that's going to be James Franklin at the start of next year if they don't make the playoff this year. So I think.
Do you really think he will be, or fans would just want him to be gone? Because he is winning a lot of games.
Buyout is too high.
The buyout's too high.
Okay.
But fans would want him gone because the whole narrative of James Franklin is it's 10 wins, 10 wins, 10 wins.
Yeah.
You always lose to Ohio State. You always lose to Michigan. Once we get to the 12-team playoff, we're going to make it every year. And so Penn State fans have been sold on it the last 3 or 4 years as the 12-team playoff has started to come out.
Yeah.
Hey, we would have been in it. Like, why are you guys complaining? We would have been in it.
Yeah.
Well, now it is the 12-team and you can be in it. So you better be in it. You know what I mean? It's
tougher conference now, though. That also worked hand in hand. It's stacked.
Yeah, it does in it. But I mean, that narrative doesn't matter. It's we would have been in it because Oregon was still good. USC was still good.
And you got to figure you're going to get 4 or 5 Big Ten teams. I mean, Big Ten and SEC are going to send most of these teams. So even if you don't win the conference, you're going to get that large opportunity that maybe West Virginia would not have.
Exactly. And I think that's the other thing, too, is, you look at the schedule. This is Penn State's year to pounce. Like, they have to pounce this year.
Yeah.
You don't get a Michigan who's mired in scandal and God knows what in Ann Arbor. And we're going to talk about that more every podcast, it seems, because it's something new every day.
I got to watch the dog still, but yeah.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, too. It's like, but Oregon is just as good as they were last year.
They can win the national title easily.
Tremendous coach.
And
they should be in Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship game.
Yeah.
But you don't play them. You don't play Michigan. You get a USC team and a UCLA teams that I don't think
are
built to play in the Big Ten. They're beatable. Same thing with Washington. Washington's replacing half their roster and their entire coaching staff. So this is you want to talk about that 1-0 mentality. You got to start 1-0 the season, because if you don't, then it's almost like the rest of the games don't much matter unless you beat Ohio State. And he's proven time and time again that unless it's a fluke, that just doesn't happen. Obviously, the Block 6, they played some competitive games last year. They turtled up. And that's the other thing, too, that I want to touch on is it's a completely different coaching staff than last year for Penn State. It's essentially it's a coordinator position. Obviously, you got Tom Allen. He is not Manny Diaz. He's a little different. But he's got the experience at defensive coordinator that Manny Diaz had. And I don't think there's going to be a significant drop-off. If not, they might even be better, which is really hard for a Penn State defense that was pretty stellar most of the season last year. And then offensively, you got Andy Kotelnicki, who comes from the Big 12. So
what a name, by the way. That's just a fantastic.
It's incredible.
It's way too syllables from
That's a college football coach name, 100%.
Right. I don't think that, like, you want to talk about a name that's perfect for what he does. It's offensive coordinator, college level. But he has that familiarity with the Big 12.
Yeah.
Obviously, being at Kansas for as long as he was, he is not Mike Yurcich. The vibes on campus and at practices and at media day are so totally different than they were last year. You want to talk about Morgantown being a vibe. There is, like, in the energy vampires, Yurcich was an energy vampire. Like, it seemed like everybody was just miserable last year with him on the staff. And it showed, not necessarily against West Virginia, because I think we all got that false hope that this was going to be the year. Like, they came out and they just thumped West Virginia. And I know we're going to talk about this probably in a couple of seconds, but, even the backups are scoring late against West Virginia last year.
Right.
But now that changed against the Ohio States, the Michigans of the world, where J.J. McCarthy just handed the ball off 75 times, it seemed. And, they didn't get the ball to Katron Allen or Nick Singleton, two of the best running backs in the country, when it mattered the most against Ohio State. So, I mean, it's a new look Penn State offense, especially with those skill guys and Tyler Warren too. And that's, I think, what makes it so intriguing. And I think that Penn State has the upper hand at offensive skill. I think that I don't know that that's much of a debate. I mean, Garrett Green is good and some of their skill guys are good, but I do think Penn State has the upper hand in that department.
I think that's definitely the case. I mean, the difference in this game, and usually And I'll give Smeltzer dap here actually, because he brought this up on Mountaineer Report when we had him on. And then you saw this with Georgia Tech, Florida State. Usually when you have an upset, the teams are different, and there's something that one of the teams does that you just can't handle, or the Florida State, for example, is caught off guard, or when West Virginia lost to Kansas a couple of years ago, that at the time was an upset, and Daniels was this running, he was a Garrett Green type of quarterback. They weren't ready for that. They don't see that really elsewhere. These two teams are very similar. Very similar. And I've said this too on shows, and I don't mean this as necessarily an insult to West Virginia at all, but you could almost look at this Mountaineers team as a poor man's Penn State team. They have a two-headed monster at running back. They have a quarterback that is the driver of the bus, that is vying for all this attention and is a talented guy that's now has a full season under his belt. You have coaches that have both been there and now are entrenched in the culture. These are historic programs with rabid fan bases. Now there's more depth at defense for West Virginia than maybe there even was last year. And there are skill position players offensively, whether it be Traylon Ray coming back because now he's a sophomore. You have to also remember, Jarrod, some of the players that West Virginia has now that are top players either weren't around or were on the roster but weren't used in the Penn State game. Jaheim White didn't touch the ball. Traylon Ray didn't touch the ball. These guys were major players when you got to the bowl game. You have Justin Robinson, who came in as a transfer. You have Jaden Bray, who's in a Big 12 title game seemingly every year. He came in as a transfer. They plucked him from Oklahoma State, another team that could vie for the title. That's a big switch situation. C.J. Donaldson is still there. Many thought he would transfer when Jaheim emerged. No, he's still there. Cole Taylor, maybe he's the most underrated tight end in college football, you could argue. They are, again, they're built off of tight ends and running backs, but also will sprinkle it too deep to a wide receiver every now and then. They're just so similar that Penn State has more five-star. They have more talent. Eventually that talent should emerge and be too much. But again, if Penn State makes a mistake or they do turn it over, and if you remember, West Virginia got close to a couple turnovers in that game last year, and if they would have got one of those, we might be having a whole different conversation. They didn't get them, and then they obviously eventually they lost standing and lost the game significantly. But if they flip one of those, then you never know. So if there's a turnover, which this defense maybe could put together, again, this is a more talented West Virginia team than existed last year, certainly at week one last year, a more experienced team, a more confident team, a team that does not have to go through the first 5 minutes of the game and trying to kind of figure out who we are. Like everything Neil Brown was saying before last year on Garrett Green was off of 2 games, mostly on the ground when he beat Oklahoma in replace of JT. It was a bad year. He was guessing. It was projecting. He now has a body of work to say, at minimum, this is Garrett Green. He missed 2 games and still got 2,500 passing yards, about 29 TDs, only 4 picks, 700 plus yards on the ground. Completion percentage isn't great. That needs to be higher. But he also missed time. I mean, he should have been at 3,000 if he would have played all those games. So he is better than what they've had. He should be even better than what he was last year. He got to be more careful with the football, but in many respects. But this is a different West Virginia team. So, again, I do think Penn State has the talent edge. And speaking of Penn State having a different coaching staff, West Virginia has full continuity. It's pretty much the full staff back. I mean, Tyler Allen did replace Sean Regan as the quarterback's coach, but Tyler Allen was on the staff last year. Him and Green already were boys. They already knew each other. Nothing was changed around. There was some catastrophic, like when they hired Graham Harrell. The system's the same. Everything's kind of the same. The vibes are the same. They all know each other and all of that. And it also will be interesting if Penn State is the one team they could face in the Big Ten that is uniquely qualified to scheme against Green because of the situation of being at Kansas. They didn't play Kansas last year, but having Jalen Daniels and being able to say, this is what Daniels would do here. Him and Green are very similar. Like you wouldn't have that even if you were still with Diaz or it was the previous coaching staff. So that maybe is one advantage in meetings, that if they're saying, hey, what would a dual threat QB do here? We don't have that in the Big Ten. And then he could say, well, Daniels would do this. Daniels did this to me. I'm guessing this is, similar to what Green would do because obviously he didn't coach in the game last year.
Yeah, and I think Kevin and I have this saying, and more so me than Kevin, stars don't matter once you're on campus.
Yeah.
So true. And I think that's the biggest thing because there's so many.
The Jaheim White thing, a 3-star kid only. And
yeah. So, I mean, there are so many busts and bust capabilities. And I think that's the other thing, too. But for me, this is going to come down to who wants it more. If there's a team that's equipped to go on the road first and play in a hostile environment, it's Penn State. They're used to it in the Big Ten, where every game is like this. At home, yes, you're playing in front of 110,000 people wearing white, whatever. They're used to it in that regard. So I think if there's another team that they come in and it's different, I think Pitt. I don't know that Pitt has that type of experience. Definitely not from games they play at Acrisure. But yeah, I think that's a thing too. But Kevin, go ahead. I know I cut you off there.
Yeah, I'm interested to see the difference on the defensive versus offensive matchup for Penn State versus West Virginia. Because last year Penn State had a really stout secondary, a lot of experience on the back end, and very weak at middle linebacker. Well, now Kobe King has a full year at middle linebacker. You have Tony Rojas now, who's probably just as athletic, if not more, than Abdul Carter. And then you have Abdul Carter now on the defensive end. So does Penn State stop West Virginia's running game? And now Garrett Green isn't able to scramble as much, and now they're forced to throw, where you're attacking Cam Miller, who got lit up in the Peach Bowl. Granted, he hadn't played a bulk of the year, was not in a starting role, and gets thrown in with two brand new starting cornerbacks last year in the Peach Bowl. So the Penn State secondary is now that weak point in theory.
It's interesting you would say that, though, because that was the recipe against Green last year. Obviously, for Penn State, the thinking was make him pass. He has to pass to beat us. You can't just do the Pat White thing. And that was the recipe most of the year. From what I'm seeing, from what I've been hearing, even as he progressed throughout last season from the Manning Passing Academy, people talking there, Green is more equipped to handle that now. And if you're saying the secondary is the weakness, they could have that strategy work for a while, but it wouldn't surprise me if then Green does catch somebody deep, or Green does start actually connecting through the air. It's not like he cannot do it. Again, he had 2,400 passing yards while missing 2.5 games. So that's likely 3,000 if you play all the games. And that was before he now has gotten arguably better through the air. Yeah, the completion percentage is low, but there's more talent there. There's a deeper wide receiver core there. They got faster guys. They can handle the red zone more. What I would look for, guys, is West Virginia's offensive problem was the red zone. They would either do it on the ground or maybe big plays, but once they got in the red zone, that sometimes was a problem, and they would look to Cole Taylor all the time. So it was one-dimensional. Penn State could just stack Cole Taylor. They try to have him jump up and do a Moss thing, and that was pretty much the red zone plan. But Justin Robinson and Jaden Bray are both red zone, bulky, strong, big body receivers. They have 3 red zone options now. So you obviously can't cover 3 guys very well in the red zone. Someone's going to have a chance. They should be better in the red zone now. So if they can get there, not a guarantee against this Penn State D, probably the best D they're going to face all year. If they can get there frequently, then they should have a better chance of actually connecting and putting points on the board. But I do think they have more of a chance. Hudson Clement wasn't even a scholarship player during the Penn State game last year, guys. He arguably is the wide receiver 1 now. And maybe you will laugh, how can he be the wide receiver 1? He had a pretty solid year last year in the Big 12. So he probably is the wide receiver 1 now. Preston Fox even stepped up, and he kind of is a staple local guy that probably will get some love because he's a local guy. So they do have a deeper room, and guys that they can throw a deep to and can hang in the red zone with that were not there before. I mean, the number 3 receiver last year was Cortez Braham at the Penn State game. He wasn't even on the team during the bowl game for West Virginia. That's how different the Mountaineers even got throughout the year when they got better. So this is a different animal than what Penn State faced last year. Mm-hmm. And I do think it should lead to this game being more competitive into the second half, which is last year when that kind of was when Penn State pulled away. But Green could make mistakes. He doesn't really throw picks, but maybe he could try to scramble and do too much. He is a guy that sometimes tries to do too much, and he has that Brett Favre gene that sometimes could be a problem. If it's not picks, it's fumbles. So we'll see. This will be his toughest test facing that Penn State defense. But if Penn State's secondary is the issue, and maybe the running backs can't dominate for the Mountaineers in this one, although CJ played well last year, CJ actually got yards against that Penn State D, then maybe they could actually get yards through the air. But the interesting thing enough, to this day, still, Drew Aller's best statistical game is against West Virginia.
Yeah,
He never threw 300 again
right.
the rest of last year.
If I'm Penn State, I think my worry is the 65-yard backbreaking touchdown, like what Keandre Lambert-Smith did last year in the opener to open it, right? Because that's the 72-yard touchdown pass that kind of just broke.
I think West Virginia tries that early. They did in the bowl game. I would expect that 1 or 2 plays in 100%.
And that's when you get scared is like you have a guy making his second career college start. You don't have Johnny Dixon, who's in year 4. You don't have Kalen King, who's in year 3, starting every single game. Yeah. So you have one guy in year 2. Now you have AJ Harris, who did not start at Georgia, but really highly recruited.
And you're on the road. Imagine if West Virginia scores that. Imagine if they get the ball first and scores second play in off a bomb like that. I mean, Green would go nuts. They would probably have trouble even getting the game started again because there would be pandemonium there.
Delay a game on the extra point.
Right. Well, Green could take his helmet off.
All the muskets will be fired at once.
Yeah, Green got to keep the helmet on if that happens. But yeah.
And I think the other thing too, and I want to get to this before we go to the third segment, is Penn State is not a fan of bulletin board material. They avoid bulletin board material like it's the plague. It's the same. It's the same shit day in and day in.
Yeah.
And it's the same message, and that's great. That works for Penn State. But over the course of the week, West Virginia hasn't shied away from it. As far as, hey, listen, we remember last year. Like Pepperidge Farm remembers, like they remember last year in that late touchdown, regardless of, whether it was warranted or not to cover the spread. Bookies everywhere,
bookies everywhere. Franklin has some cash on that thing.
Yeah, and that's a very James Franklin thing. But it's one of those situations where they're upset about it. Do you think that's going to be a really big factor on Saturday afternoon?
It's hard to say it's going to be a factor once the game is played because the same thing Neil Brown said, I'm sure James Franklin's going to be telling his team and also believes if you need the final 6 seconds and bulletin board material to give a damn about this game, you got a problem. Like that should not be your motivating situation. Both of these teams, unlike last year, have a chance at the college football playoff. They do, in all reality. For whatever reason, they both have a chance. This is a big game for both teams, even if you argue it's bigger for West Virginia because Penn State will have a bigger game against Ohio State later in the year. This is still a big game for Penn State. There is not another one, maybe ever, because of the way conference realignment's going on, way scheduling is going on. West Virginia's AD has already made it clear he wants 1 power out-of-conference game, not 2. He's been upset at how they've had that kind of stacked in recent years and thinks that's hurt the program. So he wants to play the brawl. I don't think he's going to be playing Penn State. So because of that, there's no get back. I mean, this is it. If West Virginia wins this game, even if Penn State goes to the playoff and the Mountaineers don't, Penn State fans are going to hear about this for the next 30 years. So this is a big deal. And all of that is fun during the week, but I think once they kick off, it won't matter. It's interesting to me, though, because I was sitting there, and I'm responsible for one of the viral moments, by the way. But Eddie Vestorinen is the one that brought up the 6 seconds. So he sat there and talked about how he took it personal. He's been watching it on film. He then leaves. Garrett Green comes over. We ask him, hey, Eddie said this. What are your thoughts? And Green's like, I don't care. I understand what they're doing. You got to get style points. I haven't watched it at all. And we're like, someone's either lying here or like, what do you mean you haven't watched it? He said he watched it 100 times in the same room you're in.
Well, and wasn't he turned around on the play?
Yeah, that's another. Yeah, we've seen a lot of that. Yeah, he didn't have a great moment to be the one who's bringing it up. Yeah, and then Neil Brown. And if you look back to Neil Brown's credit, he obviously, I do believe he was upset about it, and he did drop some comments about being upset about it at the time. But even after the game, he said he almost gave a "don't hate the player, hate the game" kind of comment. Like he doesn't care, he gets it, but he also added these things come back around. It almost leads me to believe, which would be hilarious, that if West Virginia is in this situation, this is a different Brown, guys. If this was 3 years ago and West Virginia had a chance to win this game, they would take a knee. Neil Brown is feeling himself a little bit now, that if the Mountaineers have a chance to do that back, I think they would do it, to be honest. I do think they would do it. And I think he has that in the back of his mind. This is just a different situation, but he was trying to avoid it too, and he said he didn't care then. And I even wrote about it then. If you remember, I had a commentary the next day that as much as I could feel it being annoying, and as an alum it could be annoying, I get it, because if you're, especially Penn State, if you're figuring you're going to be more looking at an at-large bid than being a conference champ, you crawl out of there with a 3-point win against West Virginia, who's not even a preseason ranked team. That's not going to look the same as winning by 10 points or winning by 14 instead of winning by 7. Certainly covering the spread versus not. They need the style points. They need out-of-conference wins to matter. They need to be able to say that, okay, lost to Ohio State like we always do, but we also have a ranked win against West Virginia, who now is a 10-win Big 12 champ. Something like that. They want to be able to say that. So you need to pound it. And that's just, again, don't hate the player, hate the game scenario. So I get why it happened, but it's just James Franklin stuff. I mean, that I'm sure he'll do it again if he has the opportunity with 6 seconds. I'm sure he'll do it again. I'm sure he'll be thinking exactly what I'm thinking, that we got to have style points here. And then the other comment, of course, Garnet Hollis. This is off of my literal question. I asked him, well, we know the Mountaineers' perception. They played them last year, but you weren't there. What's your perception of Penn State and that program from the Big Ten? You were a Big Ten guy. What do you think of Penn State? That's it. He went on a 6-minute rant about hating Penn State, wanting to snatch their soul. They don't care about anybody else. They're disrespecting everybody. He was a Northwestern guy, so it wasn't like he was at Ohio State or anything. He wasn't really in these games that matter. And he really hates some Penn State. So I wasn't expecting all that to be the case. I wasn't expecting that to be what he said. And yeah, the only thing I'll say about it, because McAfee's dropping some comments too, that Franklin kind of tried to sidestep and say he respects him, but it's a lot to say, obviously going into a big game, that, again, West Virginia's the underdog, Penn State's Penn State. If they lose, it won't ruin the year. Nobody nationally will say that, oh, this is some embarrassment, of course. However, if West Virginia, a better West Virginia team that we all agree is better and more formidable now, if they lose by 20 points to Penn State and Green throws the same amount of picks that he did all year last year in this game, or they just never are in the game, that then will look really bad off all the smack they've been talking, even if they win the Big 12. I mean, that'll be egg on their face. So there's some pressure the Mountaineers have put on them to perform based on all this talking that I'm sure James Franklin likes that they did, because it does add bulletin board material, and nobody from Penn State provided any. But this is the vibe of the Mountaineers. You say the Penn State doesn't need that. West Virginia feels that they're historically slighted, that nobody brings up the 15th winningest program. They feel they're slighted now. They feel like they should be in the top 25. All of that. They almost thrive off of having this confident vibe and talking smack now and feeling they have a chip on their shoulder. So maybe that's where they're at their best, when they're like that.
Listen, we're going to find out pretty quickly on Saturday what West Virginia and Penn State are all about. We're going to talk a little bit more about the rest of the season and some predictions when we come back for the third and final segment of the Lasching Out Podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. Welcome back to the third and final segment of the Lasching Out Podcast, the Nittany Sports Now Network. I'm joined by Kevin, Mike, and myself. We're talking predictions now. So, Kevin, go with you.
I want to go
bold. What's your score prediction?
I want to go bold. I said I was going to be out for blood this year, but I'm chickening out week 1. I think it could get ugly, but I'm going to go conservative and say it's going to be a 14-point Penn State win, 31-17.
Okay, similar to last year a little bit. Similar vibes to last year. Yeah.
Mike, what are you thinking?
So I do think more points are going to be on the board because the Mountaineer offense is a lot better than it was. I do think Penn State wins either way, probably a 10-point win. I think it's not going to be as comfortable as last year. They may kind of swing away towards the end. Maybe West Virginia will have the ball, but need more than one score or something like that in the final minutes. And I believe I actually said recently 42-32. That is a lot of points. I do get, but I do think it's 10-point swing regardless. Even if it's like a 38-28 or something, I could buy that too. I think there's more points than last year, but Penn State still kind of wins comfortable and still covers a 7.5-point spread. But I don't think they cover, and this will be interesting, the original line opening the summer was 12.5 that everybody thought was really, really high and was kind of a slight to West Virginia. That's what Brown's brought up as it being a slight. It'll be interesting if they cover that. Because if they don't cover that, that'll legitimize that spread was not reasonable. But if they cover it, then Brown shut up again. So we'll see what they do there. But I think they don't cover that, but they cover the 7.5 and they end up winning by 10.
I have it 34-17. I like Penn State to score some points. Again, like I mentioned before, I think that they have the experience in this atmosphere, whereas I don't know that West Virginia does, even at home. So I think that's going to come into a factor. The offensive skill guys, I think, are very good for Penn State. And I think the secondary is going to show something for Penn State as well.
Okay.
I mean, I think Abdul Carter is going to be a monster on the edge. Last year, in the game, he was a linebacker. So Abdul Carter is going to be a game changer, I think. Tony Rojas can be one as well. And KJ Winston has played really well at the safety position. So I think it's going to be 34-17. I do think there are going to be some points. It's game one. Penn State's still going to be very vanilla on offense, much like West Virginia. But the beauty in West Virginia is that they know their offense in and out. That's not necessarily the case at this point for Penn State.
That's why I think the Mountaineers are going to get over 20 points because they shouldn't have the lull to kind of figure things out like they did last year.
Right, and you hope to say for Penn State, but I do think it's going to be a great atmosphere. We were talking before we came back live. Machine Gun Kelly is going to be performing pregame, so I can't. I never thought that I'd have to go to Morgantown to see Machine Gun Kelly, but that's going to be crossed off the weird bucket list that I never knew I had until about 20 minutes ago. Sure. But I'm excited to see it. I've spent some good times in Morgantown. Over under, Mike, on couches burned.
There won't be. I don't think any of that's going to go on before the game, so they got to win to do it.
So 0.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to win. So I think
that was the shot. That was the shot.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't. I think. I mean, say hypothetically they win the game. I'll maybe over under a 2. I don't think it's going to be what it was 20 years ago. Because by the way, kids got expelled when that happened. It'll be a rockin' celebration, but I don't know if we're going to be burning things like couches and cars.
The tram will be lit.
I don't know. It'll be wild. I am concerned how we're going to get home. I will say I'm trying to leave, so it's going to be rough. Maybe with these pressers will keep us. I also will tell you, Jarrod, where the road press conference will be is usually in a room on the other side of the stadium from the press box across the field. The easiest way to normally get there is you go down from the presser, go on the field. If Penn State loses, I literally think you're going to have state troopers escorting the road media over there. And I don't know if fans can storm the field or not, because I will also tell you, they have tried to intentionally stop that with guards around goalposts. They have guards right in front if they think that could happen. They don't normally want any of that. So I'm assuming the fans are going to try it. And
100%.
Yeah, and I don't know how any of that. Yeah, I don't know how any of they probably will topple them over. But good luck to you and Joe trying to get over to James Franklin, who's going to be really lit at that point.
Oh yeah,
I don't know how that would work. I just will quickly give 2 keys that I think Penn State fans should even watch as well. You mentioned differences on the Penn State D. So position wise, Aubrey Burks, who PFF, you probably have seen it. They love him as a safety. He was a safety last year. He was a free safety, basically, which is their cat safety. He now is playing what's called the spear. That's what they call the position. Mm-hmm. It's a linebacker safety hybrid. I've written about it a lot on WVSN. So it's different. It's not a pure free safety situation. He might have a better chance of getting a fumble than an interception. It is a new role for him, and he's doing it to get himself to the NFL. He thinks it's a more exposure to the NFL type of thing. I could criticize and say, why are you trying to fix something that was fine? Like, he was not a problem when he was healthy. But that's a guy to watch to see how he plays now at the spear, or they give him more cat safety because it's not working out. They could switch it up mid-game if he's struggling at the new position. And then the other thing is Josiah Trotter. You heard the last name. That's the lineage. He didn't play in the game last year because he got hurt in the spring. He missed all year, and they still won 9. And he was supposed to be an impact guy and was penciled in near the top of the depth chart in the spring last year. All the coaches loved him. He looks like an NFL player out there. Obviously, his dad played in the NFL. His brother was a star at Clemson in the NFL. He could lead this team in tackles, and I would not be surprised. I think he's going to have an impact in this game, win or lose. And he even has something in him about maybe wanting to be at Penn State and not ending up at Penn State and all of that he discussed recently, too. There's a lot of West Virginia recruits because they tried to recruit all these Penn State kids and didn't get them. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them fell back on the Mountaineers. Jaheim White fell back on West Virginia. Trotter fell back on West Virginia. So there's a lot of motivation there. But Josiah Trotter, he has the NFL blood, and he is a physical specimen now. So he's going to be all over the place. And getting hit by him that's going to feel like you're getting hit by a Big Ten linebacker. I think he's the one that translates that they're going to remember playing him, regardless of what they may think of the West Virginia defense.
To add context to our score predictions from earlier, I did miss it. Penn State -8 over under 51.5.
Okay. Yeah, I saw it moved to 7.5 at one point. It might be back at 8 now. It's moved.
I'm just using ESPN
hour.
Bet.
That works. I mean, I did DraftKings. I think that was where the 7.5 was. But I think a 10-point difference is kind of where I'm going regardless. So I think that hits. I think a 9.5 would still be a fair spread. I do think if 12.5 is a bit much here, because as Smeltzer said too, just because a team can win by 2 touchdowns, that doesn't really mean that's a spread that should be warranted. I mean, that's really like saying this isn't even a game at 12.5. So we'll see.
A very good point.
It's interesting how the spread has come closer to the Mountaineers, though, because every time Neil Brown says we're slighted, it's unfair to us, you wake up in the morning and the spread's closer. It's almost like he's influencing these things because every time he talks,
he's behind ESPN Bet.
Maybe every time he talks, and he said Garrett Green's getting slighted, and then he's on a watch list the next day. Like people are listening to what Neil Brown says. Yeah. So
before we get into game by game predictions, we're going to just do a couple of hand-picked ones. Season prediction, record-wise. Mike, I want to start with you. What do you think Penn State's going to be at record-wise? I know you're not a Penn State writer, but what are you thinking?
I do think they're going to win this game against the Mountaineers. I do think they're going to lose to Ohio State. Probably a 10-2 situation again. I think something else is going to trip them up, even if they maybe should handle those Pac-12 teams. As we talked about, they're not kind of what they were. They are beatable. Wouldn't be shocked if maybe USC is a team that maybe could beat them just for what they do offensively, and if they're a little better defensively now. That's kind of where I would land at a 10-2 situation here, and would put them either on the outs or towards the end of the playoff. It would be an at-large situation. They wouldn't be vying for the conference title for me. It's kind of the safe bet, but they have an opportunity, as you mentioned, that they get through this Mountaineer game. Even if you lose to Ohio State, that one loss maybe does get them in as an at-large. Then you host a playoff game at Beaver Stadium, and even if you don't win that gets you money, that gets you rocking atmosphere, that gets you imagery. That's probably a little cooler for the fans than going ahead and losing the Peach Bowl.
Right. Kevin, I'm sorry, Mike. West Virginia record, what do you think?
So I did put this out. I got West Virginia at 8-4. So I do think their schedule is just tougher than it was last year. They didn't really have a major quality win last year. You could argue TCU, but then they lost to everybody. You could argue Pitt, but then Pitt had a 3-9 season. They did beat North Carolina, but Drake May wasn't there in the bowl game. It was a good year. It wasn't a great year. I do think the 8-4 makes sense. That means that they're still a good team. They're not a great team. In the last few weeks, they might be in the conversation for the Big 12 title because I don't think that champion has more than 10 or 11 wins. They probably won't get there, though. They'll be out of that race the final week or so of the season. I do think they lose to Penn State. I do think one of the home games, because they have a Big 12 gauntlet, if you look at the schedule. After out-of-conference play, they play all the ranked teams in a row. I think they lose 1 or 2 of those at home, and then probably going to Arizona. That's a far trip. I think Arizona's a little overrated this year, but that's a good team still. I do think they're a little overrated this year.
You're coming at my guys, man.
I think
Noah Fafita's my boy.
Okay. I think they're a little overrated this year, but I do think they beat West Virginia.
And a new coach.
3,000 plus mile trip. That just seems like a really, really hard road trip to get by. And then another one I circled, which would be really a West Virginia thing to mess this up, is their last road trip of the year, their season finale, is the worst road trip for anybody. They got to go to freaking Lubbock and play Texas Tech, that is perennially a 6-7 win team that'll be out of it, but they're competitive and will beat somebody, and they're going to score. And nobody's going to want to be in Lubbock at that point, especially after you have a home game before. And if you're 1 win away from 10 or for a Big 12 championship appearance, I could see a letdown in Lubbock. I mean, they almost lost to Baylor the end of last year, the game that Zach Frazier got hurt in. So that's a game to circle that I would watch out, that they could get. That's a trap kind of game before either a bowl or the playoff or a Big 12 title game or whatever. But I got 8-4 overall. I'm kind of leaning there. If they win 10, it wouldn't surprise me. I think that's the ceiling. If they win 7, it wouldn't surprise me. But I'll say this. I would be more surprised if they win less than 7 and are barely a bowl team than if they win 10. I think they're locked into being a good team, but the schedule's tougher. So fans, I know, if they win 8, they're going to be mad. They're going to say, how is that climbing? They won 9 last year. Granted, that counts the bowl game, so 8 in the regular season, you could still win 9. But it's a tougher schedule. So I don't think that means the program's screwed, but I do think 8-4 is probably where they are.
I think that 7-9 win range is great for West Virginia this year.
Yeah.
And that's successful for Neil Brown, too, I think. Obviously, you want it to be close to 9 and above, but given the strength of the schedule, I think that's pretty fair.
I think
Kevin,
8's going to feel better than 7. I just
oh,
think,
absolutely.
like 7. It sounds stupid. It's one more game. It's not the playoff either way. But I think 8 you can sell being different than 7. If they win 7,
Right.
I do think now I will say this, knowing the program, he wins 7 or more, he's not getting fired. But I think the fans are going to want him gone at 7 or less. I think 8
Right.
they might be okay. They rather have more, but 7 or less, they're going to want him gone. But the schedule's freaking tougher. Again, they're playing 4 ranked teams. Penn State doesn't even have 4 preseason ranked teams on the schedule right now.
Right.
We'll see.
Kevin, Penn State prediction.
To pull what Mike just said, good, not great. But for the scale for good for Penn State's going to be 10. The great is winning, or 11. The great would be beating Ohio State, running it. You got to run 12-0. But I think good is it's going to be same old. Penn State wins every game but Ohio State. You have USC at home. You're not going out west except to play UCLA, which probably isn't the worst.
Flip that. You got to flip that. That's the other way.
Yeah, home against UCLA at USC. So you do get USC without Caleb Williams. But yeah,
a hard road trip though. That's kind of why I think that could be the other loss. I mean,
right.
If you think they're losing to Ohio
State, they haven't done before.
So where's the other loss for you, Kevin? If you think they're going to beat West Virginia and they're going to lose to Ohio State, if you have 2 losses, where's the other one?
I think they're one. I think they're one loss.
Okay.
But USC could be
okay.
Like if they just like have a shaky game against UCLA. For whatever reason, because they're looking ahead, like, are they rattled going to LA? And then Fox puts it at noon for whatever reason, because that's what Fox does, like they did with USC in Colorado last year. So,
yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, it's Fox. I hate Fox big noon kickoff.
You guys think they're in the playoff as an at large then? Because I imagine that's
if they're 11-1. Yes, I think so.
I don't want to say yes or no, but all I say is they better be.
That has to be the bar, yeah.
That is the bar, because that's the false hope that they've sold for the last 3 or 4 years.
I mean, the whole thing of you would be in 6 out of the last 10 years and all of that. If you don't get in now on 12-team playoff, that's gone.
It would be incredibly James Franklin if they were 13th.
Oh, that would be hilarious. But I do think the James. I mean, I don't. Again, I think they're going to beat West Virginia. But another Penn State thing, like let's yell at the clouds, would be if somehow they end up 13, but West Virginia is a 4 seed as the Big 12 champion, and they beat West Virginia.
Yeah.
I mean, that could happen, and that I feel like is the secret doomsday scenario for Penn State this year. That if a team they beat is a conference champ in and they're out, that would be like, I don't know how, that would be the worst offseason imaginable, probably.
Yeah, I agree, and I think I have Penn State 11-1. I like that. I think they do lose to Ohio State, but they make the playoff, and then hopefully they host. Because that makes my travel plans around Christmas 10 times easier. But also, I think Beaver Stadium in wintertime in December would be an incredible atmosphere.
Yeah.
Parking will probably be an absolute tire fire with all the grass lots. So that'll be great. But real quick before we go, I have 4 ranked games and an unranked game that I want to get some predictions on. First one is Clemson versus Georgia. Dabo Swinney has been in the news because he's not taking calls on his coach's show anymore because he's a little whiny baby.
Correct.
Georgia is now sponsored by Uber, hopefully, for the miscues that they've had on the road.
Yeah.
Kevin, your prediction for that game?
Despite being an alumnus from Clemson, despite them paying for my entire graduate degree, I don't think it's going to be close.
Yeah,
I think it's 17.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be up to 17 points.
I think Georgia dominates. And I think Clemson's notoriously in the NIL era starting slow. They did it last year. They did it the year before. They could easily do it again. In addition to not taking callers, he doesn't want to deal with any more players asking for money, which is not a good thing to say as a head coach, obviously, right now, even though we're in the season. Players don't want to hear that. His stubbornness is ruining the dynasty. And they're still fine 100%. In the ACC possibly, but – we'll see what they do, but I think Georgia, of course, every year they're going to vie for 100%. The SEC. They're going to vie for the national championship, and they got the talents. They might even have the Heisman winner, so I think they win.
Clemson's title hopes will end week 1.
I just looked at it. You guys talk about FU spreads, 13.5.
Wow.
For a 1v14.
Clemson's 14th in the country.
But no one's tied. I mean, not really though. I mean, if they win the ACC, Florida State already has lost. If they win the ACC, they're in. And Clemson's a type of program that they also would do this. Like they would have a really slow start, win the ACC, get in as a 3 or 4 seed. Everybody say they're overrated, and then they would win a playoff game. That's what they would do. That would annoy everybody because they do have talent.
The beauty of Florida State is that they're the first team in ACC history to be in dead last in 17th place.
Correct. Yeah, that's a trivia question.
After suing the conference. That's also a game that I have. I have that circled. Florida State versus BC. Bill O'Brien, new guy up there.
Florida State got to win. I mean, come on.
It is as big of a must-win against Boston College as they've ever had.
Yeah,
it's Monday night. It's in prime time. They've had back-to-back nationally televised games.
Yeah.
After like Florida State 16.5-point favorite.
They got to win big, and they got to win. They got to win. I mean, they lose that game. There literally is no reason to play football the rest of the season.
And it would be the most incredible thing in the world if Bill O'Brien goes in there and just stops the chop.
That'd be wild.
I mean, is it wild to say that Boston College could do it though?
I just can't imagine.
I have no idea what to expect.
I can't.
They didn't just lose to imagine. I do think they could maybe have one of these be an upset, but to go back-to-back losses, I just can't.
You're still relying on DJU to throw the ball, which is
that's true. I mean, they won a lot of games with their defense by themselves last year, which is part of the whole thing of whether you want to see their offense or not. So that seems hard to believe that Boston College are going to be able to score enough points.
I think it's going to be closer than people think.
Boston College and Georgia Tech are
maybe they cover the spread, but I can't see FSU losing.
They both run the ball. Boston College can't throw it. They both run the ball like Georgia Tech.
Man, that'd be so wild.
It's Bill O'Brien.
I'm sorry. I'm rooting for it. I hate Florida State.
Absolutely. I think
we covered it last week. I hate Florida State. So
yeah, okay. I don't have any personal problem with Florida State, but that would be funny as hell.
I'm ready to watch Tallahassee burn to the ground. Okay, I'm ready to 0-2. Everything burns to the ground. I'm all for it.
I do think Florida State wins. I think it's close, but I would love an upset. Yeah. Next game number 3. LSU, number 13 in the country, USC. That game is in Vegas.
It feels like LSU is just so overrated.
It does feel that way, but do you think 13 doesn't seem overrated? Real.
13 just doesn't seem real.
Vegas is kind of a home game for
preseason rankings are.
It's
yeah. I mean, I could give you a whole rant that they should do away with preseason rankings.
Yes, I 100%. We've had that conversation.
I mean, the whole Michigan thing, putting them in the top 10. They have a different QB and head coach. I get they won the national title regardless of drama,
and they're losing their ace in the hole, their favorite analyst.
What the hell are we doing? So that it's hard to gauge of that. I mean, I do think LSU is a little bit overrated, and so is USC. I wouldn't be shocked if USC also performs on a national situation in Vegas. They're going to feel like that's kind of home, even though they're a couple hours away. What's the spread of that?
Miller Moss
4. LSU is favored by 4.
Miller Moss, man.
Over the total is 64.5.
Man, LSU favored by 4. That's almost a game to bet on. I feel like that's a game to.
100%.
That's one I stay way away from.
I mean, unless you're confident LSU is overrated.
I have
about as much.
So I guess I have to say USC.
I have as much confidence in USC as I have in Brian Kelly coming up with an even better Southern accent.
So here's what I'll do. I'll go USC to be fun. I'm going to go USC in Vegas. They show out. LSU's a little overrated. I'm not saying USC's going to go undefeated this year, but I think in week 1 we're having a conversation is USC back or anything like that. I think they show in that.
Correct. Do you want them to cover or you want them outright? It's -1.
I'm going outright win. I think they outright win the game.
I'm with you, Mike, solely because Big Ten football rules. I mean,
as a Penn State fan, USC needs to win that game.
That's a big conference game. These are obviously the 2 top conferences. I mean, that's kind of swing teams that are on the 100%. Fringe of the playoff. That if LSU beats USC handily, then they're going to be able to say we're clearly the deeper conference. If Big Ten wants to argue that, these are the games to try to win.
Now, next game. We brought up conferences. This team doesn't have a conference. Number 7, Notre Dame, Texas A&M. Number 20.
And Texas A&M is favored.
College Station, A&M is 3-point favorite. 46.5 is the total.
And it's obviously a bigger deal for Notre Dame because they don't have the chance to rely on a conference title. They don't even have the opportunity.
Right. They will be in at large no matter what.
Pure at large. It's pure overall body of work. I do think they're not out of it if they win this, or if they lose this, because they do have a game against Louisville, Florida State. If they get back together, they could actually have a situation where they lose this. They're out of it all year, and then they get a couple quality wins, and maybe they're back in there if they don't have more than one loss. I'm going to say, though, I'm going to go Texas A&M. I think Notre Dame does exactly what I'm saying. I think they suck early in the year. They lose this game. People think they're out of it. They then play slop teams, more group of fives, etc. Their schedule looks kind of easy. And then they get wins over Louisville, maybe the Florida State win. And then they're in that 14-12 range and in the conversation at the end because they creep back in there with only one loss on the overall record-wise. Similar to what happened when they played Ohio State. I think it's going to be a similar situation.
I think Notre Dame wins.
Okay.
I have no idea what to expect from Texas A&M, and they've done nothing in recent years to prove otherwise.
They could be overrated. You could argue that.
They are 9 times out of 10 typically overrated. I think Notre Dame's the
number
same
2
way.
a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
preseason wise, the Jimbo
was not great.
They were preseason top 5, and then they won 6 games or something.
Yeah, which is why preseason rankings don't matter. But here we are.
Really low total. It's the Duke Bowl. Mike Elko versus Riley Leonard.
That's right.
And 46.5 point over under. That seems low for that game.
I have no idea. I mean, I think that's a tough
kind of
one.
low. Although Notre Dame Notre Dame either really shows out and puts points on the board, or else it's really low scoring. So it depends on what you think Notre Dame's going to do. If you think they're going to lose, they're probably scoring 13 points.
My problem is I have Riley Leonard up there with Noah Fafita as my guys. So
this Arizona thing.
This is niche. I'm niche, man.
If you haven't
figured it out yet.
If you want to talk about a program that is overrated historically, it's Arizona. Because they are celebrating 125 years of football this year, 1899 to 2024. It is this year, 125. Guess how many bowl appearances they have? Not bowl wins, not claim of titles that are fake or real.
Less than 30.
22, I believe, off the top of my head. Last time I looked it up.
No, Taylor Swift, actually.
And I'll put it to you this way. In West Virginia and all the conversation on what they are historically, they have 40. 20, that's low. Arizona had that year with Rich Rod a decade ago, and then a couple others.
Yeah, Rich Rod.
They continuously get to become this sexy off-season, preseason pick, and they make sense for the Big 12. I get the market, all of that, but they very rarely have special years, and they very rarely achieve what they're supposed to be. So
they don't have a gauntlet schedule, though.
They do not. I do think they're going to be
at Kansas State, at Utah. That's it. And I mean, they're back to back. I mean, don't get me wrong,
but if they lose one of those two, then the Mountaineer game actually could be to see who goes to Dallas. I mean, that could be a major deal. And
Mike, I know you're going to have to bring Kevin on to talk Arizona football.
I will bring Kevin on when we talk Arizona football. I don't have too many other Arizona.
That is so very niche. But I want to get to the last game, Colorado and North Dakota State.
My God,
I want nothing more.
I'm saying no words.
Dakota
no
State
words.
Win.
That would be insane. I mean, that would be so insane that I literally think
Colorado's only a 10-point
out of the press conference. He wouldn't even have a press conference. He probably wouldn't show up to a presser.
Everybody would.
He'd be with the Aflac Duck.
Yeah, I think Colorado got to win. Got to win relatively big, but I mean that would be wild.
They're only 10-point favorites.
That is kind of insulting, honestly. Yeah,
which is nuts. Now, as weird as Prime has been, he's done some cool things.
Play them. I want to talk to him so bad.
May not be allowed.
I would 100% be banned like in the future. I mean, I would have maybe one or two pressers.
Just got one question.
That would be it.
Yeah, out with a blazing glory.
Yeah.
But I did see that the fathers that are on the team, he did start a 529 program for the kids. I think that was great.
Oh, he does.
He also banned.
Yeah.
He does some great things,
but
then he does some pretty stupid things too. So
yeah,
it's picking your poison with Deion Sanders. So there's the good, the bad, and the what the are you thinking?
I loved him as a player. He's done a lot of great things. Colorado program was nothing. Nobody cared about it. None of their games were on national TV. He resurrected the whole thing. He put eyeballs on things. He did win on the FCS level, which, by the way, is hard to do because you're dealing with finances and whether people have enough money.
And at HBCU.
And he did beat TCU, the national runner-up at the time, even though they had kind of obviously an off year after that. He's I think, honestly, if anybody would have asked you 10 years ago that Deion Sanders is going to be a major level coach, you would have laughed at it. And he's achieved more than even what people would have thought at that time, just off the FCS success. This is only 1 year in. Colorado did win one game the year before him. I'm actually kind of friends with the interim coach of Mike Sanford, who was there before Deion. Now I've had him on shows. They were 1-11. They had no chance in any of those games. Mike will tell you that. So Deion winning 4 is a turnaround from that, even though it's not good. And they had no defense. They have no O-line. Shador is still very, very good. He's a top Big 12 QB, even though there's, no O-line again that'll hurt him. Them losing is not even on Deion. I do think he's improved from where they were. The problem is, again, he's coming off thin-skinned. You don't want to talk to somebody who's criticizing you. That's a little ridiculous. Like those things are going to cause people to be annoyed by you, and I am. But, yeah, there's good things, too. They should win that game. But I don't think they're winning more than 7 games in the year. I think they're barely a bowl team. I don't think they're winning the Big 12. I don't think they're vying for it. I think West Virginia is better than them. Battle of the trenches, O-line, D-line, I don't think they have it. That's the problem. That was the problem last year.
Have you looked at the back half of Colorado's schedule? Utah, Kansas, Oklahoma State.
Oh, there you go. And you know what I mean?
Gone.
And not only are they gone,
over.
But you want to compare, West Virginia has Baylor, UCF, the Texas Tech game. I mean, West Virginia could roll the end of the season, even if they're out of it.
Right.
Colorado does not have that opportunity. Like last year, it was hard at the end. So, and West Virginia doesn't play Utah. Colorado has a hard schedule again, and and everyone's going to gun for them. The problem with Colorado too is, like when teams play Penn State or when they play Ohio State, etc. When Penn State plays Ohio State, you want to give it your all, and you have a bullseye on your back. If you're Penn State in a game or Ohio State in a game or Notre Dame, everyone wants to. Notre Dame hasn't won a national title since '88, but everyone treats them like it's a bullseye. We got to kill Notre Dame because they're Notre Dame. Deion puts that on Colorado, even though Colorado hasn't been good in 30 years.
That's a very good point.
So, like, people are going into the Colorado game saying, we got to kill them, we got to embarrass them, we got to brag to them. I want to destroy Colorado.
And I don't even think they want to just do that to Colorado. They just want to do it to Deion Sanders.
Yeah, just Colorado has to get the residual effects that, like, Shador is trying to fight the battles that
they're getting
Deion
the strays.
Sanders. Yeah, the Deion Sanders is putting out the fires, and Shador got to try to put it out. Like that's harder too, especially when you have a hard schedule. So I don't see a path to Colorado winning 7-8 games, certainly not double digits. And then Shador loses eligibility. So,
but he still has his cars, so that's always a positive.
And the watches, he'll have the watches.
Yeah, the watches.
That's right. The drip will be strong.
Do you have an over/under on a touchdown watch celebration for Shador?
3.
Go like this with the.
I think he'll have 3 watches. Yeah.
And will the watch be on under the jersey?
I don't know, but I think he might wear one like as a necklace too, like Flavor Flav. Like
someone going to throw it to him after he scores. Like
that.
I hope so.
See that.
I want nothing more than to see North Dakota State win. I think that would be great. This game's on Thursday night, so that's a nice little kickoff into the weekend. But Mike, I'll let you give your spiel here, where people can find you, what you're doing. I know you introduced yourself, but we'll let you sign out here, and then we're going to wrap things up for this week's edition.
Yeah, so of course I got the West Virginia coverage, running things at WV Sports Now or West Virginia Sports Now, a part of that Sports Now family. I'm also a feature writer at Yardbarker, so write about pretty much everything in the national scene there, including some Deion. I've actually written some things about Deion recently over there. Mic drop.
You might not even be allowed back.
I probably already can't talk to him, but whenever they do play, he's probably going to be like, Mike, no, we read the Yardbarker article, because he's apparently searching his name probably. So mic drop available everywhere you get your podcast. It's with Believe, also on Sirius XM occasionally over there. At Mike Asti 11 on social media, so you can find me everywhere there. Mountaineer Report is a new pod we have with WVSN that also is available everywhere you get your podcasts, on the WVSN YouTube channel and available there. And then I'm all over the place. So just Google search me, because you can that'll be probably the easiest way. But those are the main things to hit on.
Kevin, everybody knows who you are if they're listening to this. But go ahead and tell the West Virginia fans that might be tuning in.
Yeah, I run the podcast account at Lasching Out Pod on Twitter. I also at KT Quigley 24 on Twitter as well. You'll see me posting about a plethora of things, not football most of the time.
Okay. Arizona football, apparently.
Yeah. Deep dives on Arizona football.
If Arizona wins 6 games, I am absolutely sliding in your DMs and bragging about it. So
that's fine. You can at me on Twitter.
If they win 10, you can come at me. But
it's already saved.
You will come out the world.
It's already saved my drafts. It's already there.
A little tidbit here before I say goodbye. I just saw this on Twitter, so my phone is listening to me. A little nugget on NDSU. This is from Guy Haberman on the Twitter sphere, or X, or whatever you call it. The FCS level doesn't have helmet communications, but teams were allowed to do it when they play an FBS team. Yeah. That means they have to make a full investment in the system just for one game. Guess who spent the money? North Dakota State.
Oh, that's funny because the other FCS games from week 0, those FCS teams did not use it because they they chose not, and they could have. They chose not.
And North Dakota State is probably not like many FCS teams. They have
a normal FCS program.
True. Yeah. I mean, it's probably going to be like when Appalachian State beat Michigan in 2007. Then we saw what Appalachian State kind of became. Obviously, it's a major upset, but they were a legit program. We'll see. And honestly, if you're North Dakota State guys, wouldn't you do the same thing? Be like, oh yeah, it doesn't matter. RC. I don't care if we win one game all year. If that's the win, I'm good. Like I would put it all in that basket.
Right, and they'll make it to the semifinals or the finals for FCS too.
Yeah, I mean they're legit. Yeah, they got a dynasty. Yeah, I would be calling Connor Stallions, being like, "You want to intern this week? Like we gotta put something together."
Allegedly.
I'd bring Belichick on the staff. But tell me what you did.
That's the one thing I know, Mike, that you haven't watched that. I can't imagine how easy it was to become a coach. Like you just walked into the coach's office at Navy and said, "Hey, I want to be a coach." And they said,
"I don't get how he got on the field. Like who credentialed?"
And then the same deal at Michigan. Charlie Parker said, "Hey, man, like, can I help you?" Yeah, sure, man. Like, just taking random strangers off the street like they're stray cats.
Don't you wish like all 3 of us easily could have done that? Like we could.
If I would have known that, I would have tried to do that at 95% of the schools that I've been to. Hey, why is this guy here? Arrest him. Like that's. Yeah, I can't believe it's that easy, and I don't think that it's that easy. Maybe we'll ask James Franklin if he's in a cheery mood. James, if I showed up on your doorstep on Monday,
can I be a coach?
Can I be a coach? Yeah. I call dibs. Dave Jones and Corey Geiger can also join. We'll run the offense. But you can find me at JFrugar26.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, God. That's enough of that. On Twitter, follow me for Curve coverage. I'm sorry, it's not Curve baseball season. High school football coverage, Penn State coverage for NSN. I'm all over the place. It's a nice little overlap here for the next couple of weeks. But thanks again to Mike Asti for joining us, for Kevin Quigley, Jarrod Prugar, and everybody at the NSN network. Thank you, and we'll catch you again next week.